All right, today we're going to have another Bearded Wonder Explains. This time we're talking about sovereignty. Sovereignty is basically this question of within a society, who ultimately gets to make a decision. So, in the state of nature, it's pretty simple. Each person just kind of makes their own decisions for themselves, and the individual is sovereign completely. If you can do something, you have the freedom to do it, period. However, there are people in the state of nature that choose to behave in ways that are somewhat unsettling for everybody else, and so there becomes this need for somebody to decide between the two. Is it better to start dumpster fires or to love the environment, for example? And when we're trying to get along together, we kind of need somebody to make that decision for us. And so it leads us to from a state of nature into what we call a state of society. In other words, people kind of decide together that they are going to give up some of their natural rights, that they're going to give those rights to a government, and that government is then going to use those rights to order society in certain ways. And so the question that was kind of being wrestled with around the 16 and 1700s in England and in America was, are we giving up all of our rights to the government or not? And basically, there was a debate between a guy named John Locke, the guy here on the left, and a guy named Thomas Hobbes. John Locke kind of argued for this contractual arrangement where the people decided which rights they gave up and which ones they didn't. That was kind of his way of looking at it. Thomas Hobbes wrote a book called Leviathan, where he basically said the people give up all of their rights, that as long as the government protects them, whatever that means, that it is fair for it to take whatever it wants. Now, Thomas Hobbes argued that the people gave that right up to a king. And John Locke even kind of agreed that for the most part, a lot of those rights did go to the government, but it went to the people's representatives, in other words, to the legislature, and not to the king, or in England, it's basically the parliament. The colonists kind of took John Locke's idea and they built it even further. And basically argued that the people themselves had kept certain sovereignty, that they could give it to their representatives kind of temporarily to make laws, but the people had to be represented by the government. And since there was nobody in the British Parliament that represented them, that they had those rights themselves. This is no taxation without representation. Parliament in England disagreed with that and said, listen, you gave up the rights to the Parliament, and we're kind of looking out for you, and we're going to do whatever we want. This leads to the Declaration of Independence, where Thomas Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence specifically says that the people have the right to set up a government. Basically, that the government works for the people. And so in America, the question of sovereignty is really resolved in the Declaration of Independence because they say, listen, take them back whenever they need to. In other words, who gets to decide? Ultimately, it's the people, and not the government. And so they can give up a small amount of rights to the government. They can give up, for example, the right to a small amount of taxation. Or they can give up the right to take revenge if somebody steals their stuff. But for the most part, they keep those rights, and it's up to them. Now, this is going to lead to a question that we're going to explore when it comes to sovereignty, and that's which government actually has these rights, because we are accustomed to thinking of a national government, but the reality is that in 1776, when the colonies declared independence from England, they had separate state governments, and those people, the people of each state, voted for legislators in each state. And so the question is, Did they give up the rights to the national government or to the state governments? And this is going to lead to kind of a disagreement between two uh, leading parties led by two obvious men, Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson. And basically, Alexander Hamilton's argument was that the people of the United States, proper noun, gave up their rights to the national government, that the national government kind of works for everybody. Thomas Jefferson argued no, the states kind of worked together to create a national government, but those rights came from the national government. And so you have these two kind of arguments over um, which entity, the national government, the United States of America, all caps, or the United, small u, States, capital S, of America, and which one had power. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about this in the next video, but that's basically where we're going to leave off this video, is this question between which entity actually did the people have a contract with.